Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my HOA, Karen Tales channel? Thank you so much. The sound of splashing water jolted me awake. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then came the laughter, high-pitched, carefree, and most definitely not mine. My bedroom window faced the backyard, and as I groggily pulled back the curtain, I nearly dropped my phone in shock. There in my private pool, a full-blown party was in progress. Strangers lounged on floaties, kids cannonballed into the deep end, and a speaker blasted music so loud it vibrated my window. Right at the center of it all, cocktail in hand and sunglasses perched atop her overly styled blonde hair, was none other than Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. I knew Karen was bad news the moment I moved into this neighborhood. She acted as though she ran the place, enforcing rules that didn't exist and making sure everyone bent to her will. She once left a note on my car for parking in my own driveway because, according to her, it ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic. I'd had my fair share of run-ins with her, but this was next-level insanity. Storming outside, I waded through the chaos, dodging a kid flinging water balloons before finally reaching Karen. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. Karen barely glanced at me, sipping her drink with an infuriating level of nonchalance. "Oh, relax. It's just a little community gathering." Isterte here, incredulous. A community gathering? This is my backyard. My pool. She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's not like you were using it." My jaw tightened. "That's not the point. You trespassed onto my property and threw a party without even asking." Karen finally turned to face me, a smirk playing on her lips. "You're part of the HOA, sweetheart, and the HOA has a rule about unused amenities being shared among the community." I knew she was bluffing. "That's complete BS, and you know it." "Oh, come on," she scoffed. "It's for the good of the neighborhood. We have guests over, and I couldn't just let them sit in the heat, could I?" I glanced around at the people enjoying my pool as if they had every right to be there. A man in swim trunks raised a beer at me in what I assumed was meant to be a friendly toast. A group of women lounging on my patio furniture whispered and giggled, completely unfazed by my growing frustration. "You have 10 minutes to clear out," I said, keeping my voice even, "or I'm calling the police." Karen's smirk deepened. "Oh, honey, the HOA and I have a good relationship with the local officers. They're not going to do a thing." I clenched my fist. "Fine, then I'll handle this my way." She laughed. "Do whatever you want, but good luck getting rid of us." With that, she turned away, effectively dismissing me in my own damn backyard. I stormed back inside, my mind racing. Karen had backed me into a corner, and she knew it. The police probably wouldn't take a trespassing call seriously, and confronting Karen directly would just escalate things in a way that played into her hands. No, if I wanted to win this, I had to think smarter. I had to hit her where it hurt. And just like that, the perfect plan formed in my mind. I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. It didn't take long to find exactly what I needed: chlorine reactive pool dye. Completely harmless, but when added to a chlorinated pool, it would turn the water a brilliant, radioactive-looking shade of neon green. Smirking to myself, I placed an express order. By tomorrow, Karen's little community gathering would have an unforgettable surprise. For the rest of the evening, I kept a close eye on my pool from the window, watching as Karen and her guests partied without a care in the world. It took everything in me not to storm back out there and dump ice water on all of them, but patience was key. By the time they finally left, hours later, leaving trash and empty beer bottles scattered around, my resolve was set. The next morning, I got up early to retrieve my package. The small vial of dye looked unassuming, but I knew the effect would be spectacular. I waited until just before noon when the sun was high, and Karen's second round of party guests started trickling in. Slipping outside unseen, I poured the dye into the filter system and stepped back inside, watching through the window. It took a few minutes, but then perfection. The water slowly shifted from clear blue to an unnatural glowing green. I barely contained my laughter as shrieks filled the air. The transformation was gradual, so people didn't notice right away, but the moment the first person spotted the neon shade, chaos erupted. "Oh my God, what is that?" someone screamed. "Is the water toxic?" Karen, who had been lounging with an air of self-importance, bolted upright in her chair. What happened to the pool? Panic spread like wildfire. Partygoers scrambled out of the water, some slipping on the wet pavement in their haste. The green dye clung to their skin and swimsuits, making it look like they'd been swimming in radioactive sludge. One man tripped and fell face first into a tray of snacks, while another woman desperately tried to rinse off in my garden hose. I finally stepped outside, arms crossed. "Oh no," I said, feigning concern. "Looks like my pool's experiencing a chemical imbalance." Karen spun to face me, her face red with fury. "What did you do?" I shrugged. "Well, you said it was a community pool, right? So I just did some routine maintenance." Her mouth opened and closed, no words forming behind her. One of her guests cursed as he realized his white swim trunks were now permanently stained green. "This is vandalism," Karen finally shrieked. "Oh no, Karen," I said, barely suppressing a grin. "This is just a little community fun." The look on her face was worth every second of planning, but I knew this war was far from over. Karen wasn't the type to take an embarrassment like this lying down. No, this was just the beginning. Karen's face twisted in fury, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Around her, the chaos continued as people fled my now neon green pool, dripping toxic-looking water onto my patio, my lawn, and even my driveway. The guy in white swim trunks cursed loudly, realizing his shorts were ruined, while another woman frantically rubbed at her skin as if she could scrub the green off. It was a perfect scene of panic, and I savored every second of it. "You think this is funny?" Karen screeched, stepping toward me with her fists clenched. "You just poisoned my guests." I raised an eyebrow, arms crossed. "Oh, so now they're your guests?" A second ago, this was a community event. Her nostrils flared, and she pointed an accusatory finger at my face. "This is illegal. You tampered with a pool people were using." A snort of laughter escaped me before I could stop it. "Karen, it's non-toxic pool dye. If you had even the slightest knowledge of pool maintenance, you'd know that. But hey, feel free to call the cops. I'd love to explain how you and your friends were trespassing on my private property." Her bravado faltered just for a second, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes before she recovered. "Oh, trust me, the HOA will be hearing about this." "I'm counting on it," I shot back. With that, Karen stormed off, dripping green water in her wake. Her guests awkwardly followed, muttering complaints as they grabbed their things. One guy, still trying to shake neon droplet from his hair, muttered, "Man, this is the last time I come to one of her parties." As they dispersed, I took a deep breath, relishing the temporary peace. But I wasn't stupid. I knew Karen well enough to know this wasn't over. She wasn't just going to lick her wounds and move on. No, she was going to retaliate, and I needed to be ready. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the HOA. The subject line alone made my blood boil. Violation notice. Unauthorized chemical use in community pool. I opened it, already expecting the ridiculousness inside. "Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you have introduced an unauthorized chemical substance into the shared neighborhood pool, creating a hazardous situation for residents. Due to this reckless action, you have been issued a fine of $500. Please remit payment immediately to avoid further consequences. Best, HOA Board." My hands tightened around my phone. The audacity, the absolute audacity. First, they invaded my space, used my pool without permission, and now they were fining me for it. Oh, this was war. I fired back an email within minutes. "Dear HOA, please provide documentation proving that my privately owned pool is considered a shared neighborhood pool. If the HOA wishes to claim ownership over my property, I will be happy to forward this matter to my attorney. Furthermore, I have extensive video evidence of multiple HOA members, including Karen, trespassing on my property without permission. I assume this was a clerical error, and I look forward to your prompt removal of this baseless fine. Best, the actual homeowner of the pool in question." I hit send with a satisfied smirk, but I knew this wasn't the end of it. Karen wouldn't let it be. That very afternoon, I spotted her marching down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, knocking on doors. She was rallying support. I watched from my porch as she put on her best concerned citizen act, talking to neighbors, gesturing wildly toward my house, showing them something on her clipboard, probably some fabricated rule or manipulated story about how I was a menace to the community. A few neighbors looked skeptical. A couple even rolled their eyes, but some nodded along, clearly drinking the Karen Kool-Aid. By the time she reached my house, I was waiting. I greeted her coolly, leaning against my door frame. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I've spoken with multiple homeowners who agree that your behavior is a direct violation of community standards. I raised an eyebrow. Which community standards would those be? The ones where people don't trespass on a private property, or the ones where they don't throw unauthorized parties in someone else's backyard? She huffed, flipping her clipboard around to show me a printed document. We're proposing an emergency HOA amendment to allow for reasonable community use of underutilized private amenities. I nearly laughed. So you want to steal people's property legally? She clenched her jaw. It's about fostering community spirit. It's about you not getting what you want. I folded my arms. No one is going to vote for this. Oh, I think they will, she shot back smugly, especially when I remind them that you're a danger to the neighborhood, using dangerous chemicals, creating unsafe environments, displaying hostile behavior toward neighbors. I exhaled sharply. Karen, let me be very clear. If you or anyone else steps foot on my property again without my permission, I will press trespassing charges. She blinked. That seemed to rattle her for the first time, but she recovered quickly, flipping her hair over her shoulder. We'll see what the community decides. With that, she turned on her heel and strutted away. That night, I doubled down. I started knocking on my neighbors' doors, the ones who had also been harassed by Karen. It didn't take much convincing. She had made enemies of plenty of them over the years. Oh, I hate Karen, one neighbor admitted, crossing her arms. She tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of beige on my front door. She's tried to rewrite HOA rules before, always for her own benefit, another said. By the end of the night, I had more than enough support to counter whatever nonsense Karen was trying to pull, and I wasn't stopping there. I spent hours digging through the HOA bylaws, looking for a way to shut her down for good. Then I found it, a loophole. Karen wasn't even technically a homeowner. She was renting. That changed everything. Armed with this new information, I went to bed with a grin because tomorrow, at the next HOA meeting, I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end her reign for good. The next morning, I woke up to a new level of pettiness. My front yard was littered. I was bombarded with HOA violation notices, half of them duplicates, citing nonsense like failure to maintain a uniform aesthetic and unauthorized modifications to community property. One even accused me of willfully disturbing the peace with hazardous substances. That one made me laugh. Karen was working overtime. But it didn't stop there. By noon, I had received 3 separate calls from supposed concerned neighbors, all suspiciously echoing the same talking points. I was a troublemaker, I had endangered the community, and I should just apologize and make things right, as if Karen hadn't thrown a full-blown, unauthorized party in my backyard. Then came a cherry on top. I stepped outside to check my mail, and there she was, Karen, standing on my lawn, arms folded, watching me like a hawk. "Morning," I said, feigning politeness. "I'm giving you one last chance," she said, her voice tight with restrained anger. "Retract your complaint, apologize to the HOA, and this will all go away." I looked around dramatically. I don't see the HOA here, just you." Her eye twitched. "I am the HOA." "No, Karen," I corrected. "You're on the HOA." "Big difference." Her lips pursed. "You think this is a game, don't you?" I shrugged. "I think you trespassed through a party in my pool, got humiliated, and now you're throwing a tantrum." Karen's nostrils flared. "Fine, you want to play hardball? Let's play." She turned on her heel and marched off. That wasn't a good sign. Hours later, I found out exactly what she meant. She had escalated beyond petty notices. She had filed a formal complaint with the city about my property, claiming my pool was a hazardous waste zone due to chemical contamination. This wasn't just HOA nonsense. If the city got involved, they could fine me force unnecessary inspections, even temporarily shut down my pool. I had officially underestimated her insanity. A city inspector actually showed up on my door, clipboard in hand, looking vaguely apologetic. "I'm just here to do a routine check," he said. I led him to the backyard, already anticipating the outcome. Sure enough, within minutes, he confirmed what I already knew. "Yeah, this is just normal pool water," he said, shaking his head. "Whoever filed this report either doesn't know what they're talking about or was being deliberately misleading." "I'm betting on both," I muttered. He sighed, making some notes. "I'll be filing this as an unnecessary complaint. Shouldn't affect you at all." That was a relief, but it still made my blood boil. Karen had actually wasted city resources just to harass me. I wasn't letting this slide. I called a lawyer. After explaining the entire situation, my lawyer was very interested. "You have video evidence of her trespassing, documented harassment, and now a false complaint filed against you? Yeah, you have a solid case for a cease and desist at the very least." That was exactly what I needed. The next morning, I had a formal cease and desist letter drafted, but I wasn't stopping there. I wanted to hit her where it really hurt, the HOA meeting that evening. I walked into the meeting room prepared. Karen was already seated at the front, acting like she was running a presidential debate. A handful of neighbors were there, some supportive of her, but plenty who were just tired of her antics. As soon as I walked in, she smirked. "Oh, look who decided to show up." I smirked back. "Oh, don't worry, I wouldn't miss this for the world." The meeting began, and right on cue, Karen launched into a speech about community unity and respecting shared spaces. She framed the entire situation as if I had wronged the neighborhood, twisting facts and using flowery language to make herself seem like the victim. Then she pulled out her biggest play, her proposed rule change to avoid future conflicts. She announced dramatically, "I am proposing a new bylaw allowing community access to unused private amenities for scheduled neighborhood events." I raised my hand to question, who determines if a private amenity is unused? Karen beamed, already thinking she had me cornered. "The HOA board, of course." I nodded and asked, "And who is on the HOA board?" "The elected members, including myself," she said smugly. "So you get to decide if my pool is unused and then take it over?" She faltered slightly but recovered. "It's a fair system." "No," I said, pulling out my paperwork. "What's fair is following actual legal property laws." I passed the cease and desist letter to the HOA president, making sure Karen saw the official legal stamp. "This is a formal notice regarding Karen's harassment, trespassing, and false complaints against me. If it continues, I will be pursuing further legal action." Karen's face drained of color, and I continued, pulling out another document. I did some digging. "Karen isn't even a homeowner, she rents." Murmurs spread through the room. One of the board members frowned. "Wait, is that true?" I placed the rental records in front of them. According to HOA bylaws, only homeowners can hold positions on the board. Karen has no legal authority here. Silence. Absolute delicious silence. Then chaos. The neighbors who had been putting up with Karen's nonsense for years pounced. People who had never spoken up before suddenly had a lot to say about her rule bending, her harassment, her fake citations. The HOA president clearly panicked and promised to review the situation, but it was already over. Karen was done. She sat there silent, face growing redder by the second, unable to argue against the cold, hard truth. By the end of the meeting, a vote was called. The decision was unanimous. Karen was removed from the board immediately. The cherry on top, since she wasn't a homeowner, she couldn't contest the vote. As the meeting wrapped up, I leaned in and whispered, "Looks like you were the one trespassing all along." She had no words, just a blank, stunned expression. And with that, the queen of the HOA fell. The meeting had ended, but the real fallout was just beginning. Karen sat frozen, her face drained of its usual smugness, while neighbors filed out, murmuring amongst themselves. Some were giddy with excitement at her downfall, while others just seemed relieved that the reign of terror was finally over. I stayed seated, watching as reality sank in for her. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was powerless. For the first time, Karen had no rules to twist, no authority to abuse, and no way to weasel out of her own mess. I expected her to explode, to scream and demand some last-minute coup to reclaim her throne, but she didn't. She just gathered her things, stood up stiffly, and walked out without a word. I wasn't foolish enough to think she was giving up. If I knew anything about Karen, it was that she wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. The next morning, I woke up early to check my property for any Karen-related damage. Nothing seemed off. No trash dumped in my yard, no suspicious new HOA violation notices pinned to my door. But when I stepped out to get the mail, I saw Karen down the street, standing with a small group of her loyal followers. She wasn't done. She was scheming. Later that afternoon, I got a message from a neighbor who had been at the meeting. Heads up, Karen's trying to convince the HOA board to reinstate her as an advisor. She's arguing that since she was unfairly removed, she should still be allowed to influence decisions. Pretty sure she's trying to get back at you. I grinned. She was desperate. That meant I had one. But just to be sure, I decided to deliver the final blow. First, I emailed the HOA president, attaching the rental records once again, just in case there was any doubt that Karen had no business making any decisions. I made sure to point out how many real homeowners had spoken against her and how allowing her back in any capacity would be a direct violation of the very bylaws they claimed to uphold. Then I did something Karen never expected. I went to her landlord. It wasn't hard to find out who owned the house she was renting. It was public record. A few phone calls later, I got the number of the actual homeowner and left a message explaining that their tenant had been falsely presenting herself as an HOA official, causing neighborhood disputes and even getting the city involved in personal vendettas. I made sure to emphasize how this could legally become their problem. By the next day, I had my answer. A for rent sign was staked into Karen's front yard. The news spread fast. Karen wasn't just off the HOA board. She was being kicked out of the neighborhood entirely. Turns out her landlord wasn't a fan of lawsuits and city complaints. They wanted nothing to do with her. That evening, as I sat on my patio, I watched Karen stomp around her yard, yanking signs from the ground and furiously speaking into her phone. I had never seen her this unhinged before. Her usual calculated arrogance was gone. She looked genuinely lost. I almost felt bad for her, almost. The final showdown came 3 days later when the HOA held a follow-up meeting to address the changes following Karen's removal. She showed up. I wasn't sure if she was there to beg, to threaten, or to make a scene, but as soon as she walked into the room, the entire atmosphere changed. No one was on her side anymore. She had lost her power, her influence, and any goodwill she might have once had. She tried to speak, but the HOA president cut her off. Karen, you're no longer a member of the board. You have no authority here. That hit her like a slap to the face. She physically recoiled, but she recovered quickly. I still have a right to be heard as a resident. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone coughed awkwardly. The HOA president sighed. Actually, no you don't, Karen. She blinked. Excuse me. He pulled out a paper. Your landlord submitted a formal notice of eviction. Your lease is being terminated as of the end of this month. You won't be a resident. The room fell into silence. Karen turned red, then pale, then red again. You can't do this, she sputtered. A neighbor from the back piped up. Oh, honey, looks like you're the one being removed from our community. Laughter, actual genuine laughter, spread across the room. Karen looked around, finally realizing that she had lost completely. With nothing left to say, she turned and stormed out. That was the last time anyone saw Karen in our neighborhood. Within 2 weeks, she was gone. Her house was empty, her reign of terror officially over. To celebrate, I threw a real neighborhood pool party, one where everyone was invited except Karen. Just for fun, I served green punch. With Karen officially gone, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, freer. It was like a collective breath of fresh air swept through the street. No more ridiculous citations showing up on people's doors. No more passive-aggressive HOA emails about lawn ornaments being too festive. No more unannounced trespassing into private property. Neighbors who had previously kept to themselves started talking to each other more. It was as if Karen had kept us all in a state of paranoia. afraid that any minor infraction would put us in her crosshairs. But now, people were laughing about her downfall over coffee and sharing their horror stories like war veterans exchanging battle scars. She once fined me for having a wreath on my door in February, one neighbor confessed. Apparently, winter decorations are only allowed until January 31st. Who makes up rules like that? Another neighbor chimed in, shaking his head. She measured my grass with a ruler and told me it was an inch over the limit. I had to mow it that same day, or she threatened to escalate it to the HOA board. Guess that won't be a problem anymore. It turned out that everyone had a Karen story, and now that she was gone, it was like a weight had been lifted. The official HOA meeting a week later was a total contrast to the ones before. Instead of Karen lording over everyone with her clipboard and smug grin, the new board, made up of reasonable homeowners, focused on actual neighborhood improvements. The ridiculous fines she had pushed were dismissed, and some of the rules she had shoehorned into the bylaws were. The outright repeal of one of the board members, now acting as president, stood up. We also want to extend an apology to those who were unfairly targeted. Karen, well, she took things too far. That's not what this HOA was meant to be about. A few people clapped. Others nodded in agreement. It was refreshing hearing common sense for once. After the meeting, I got more than a few pats on the back. "You're a hero, man," one neighbor joked. "You took down the HOA queen." Another grinned. Seriously, though, that was legendary. It was strange. I hadn't done it for recognition. I had just wanted my damn pool back. But somehow, I had become the guy who ended Karen, and I wasn't going to pretend I didn't enjoy the reputation just a little. That weekend, I finally threw my own real pool party, the one I had control over without entitled guests barging in uninvited. I made sure to invite everyone who had ever been harassed by Karen. It was part celebration, part neighborhood bonding, and part victory lap. When guests arrived, they burst out laughing at the sight of my drink table. I had gone all out. Green punch, green margaritas, even green-tinted lemonade. "Dude," one guy wheezed, holding up his cup. "You had to go with the neon green, huh?" "Oh, absolutely," I said with a smirk. "Got to commemorate the great pool incident." Everyone raised their cups in mock salute, the moment cementing itself in HOA history. As the party continued, I looked around at all the relaxed faces, the laughter, the easy conversations. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to feel like, not constant tension, not fear of arbitrary rules or a Choi dictatorship. Just people living their lives, enjoying their homes, and looking out for each other. That was when one of my neighbors leaned in, grinning mischievously. "So, I heard Karen moved to a new HOA. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah." He took a sip of his drink. "A buddy of mine lives over there. Apparently, she's already causing trouble. Filed a complaint about someone's mailbox color 2 days after moving in." I couldn't help but laugh. "Of course she did." Another neighbor smirked. "Think we should warn them?" I pretended to consider it. "Nah, let them find out the hard way." The party went well into the evening, and as I sat back, drink in hand, watching people enjoy themselves, I realized just how much better life was without Karen. She had tried to take over. She had tried to make the neighborhood hers. But in the end, she was the one who had been kicked out, and for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly as it should be.